Hey guys, this is Dorian with another video, and in this one we're going to texture the character Gabriel here, which we built from concept, and we're going to finish it in the game engine. And this video is about the texturing part. So I think that in the last video we finished off by by UV and packing character Gabriel. So let's go to UV editing. So at this point we have our model and the texture, and the UV map is completely ready to go. But before we can get into Substance Painter to texture the character, we need to follow a specific type of naming convention for the baking of the Substance Painter in the Substance Painter. So I'm going to show you what to do exactly. So this is the outliner, and the character is all of these parts, and the naming convention is a way to tell Substance Painter which part of the model should have effect on the low poly model. And this is going to make a lot more sense in Substance Painter, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine the pieces that I want to have their own ambient occlusion, like the arm here and the forearm is actually this one too. Okay, then the hand is alone, the three part of the fingers each stands alone. The torso and the neck is a piece. So is the other arm, the forearm. Actually, oh damn it, I forgot to mirror this guy. So yeah, this is combined with this one with this. Okay, and the legs here, I'm gonna combine all the pieces of the thigh like so, and same for the other one. Combine, then the calf. Yep. If you're working on a robot character too, the odds are you're gonna have to do these things too, because usually the robot characters are consistent of many different pieces. They're usually not in one piece, in case it's unless it's a pretty simple type of a robot and it doesn't have a lot of details in the mesh. And the head is gonna be another piece. And yeah, okay, so now the pieces are just right, and we can get to the naming part. So the way Substance works is that you pick a model, you pick a piece of mesh, for example this part, and you know what, let's group these first so they'll be more organized. I'm just gonna put all of these in the folder here. Damn it. Just press Ctrl G to make all of them a single folder, and pull this out. Okay, So now, for example, this piece here, this is the forearm, and because this is a low poly model, it has to end with underline low, because that's the language that the substance painter understands, that this is the forearm piece and also it's the low part. And for that reason, I'm going to name this forearm, and it's the left arm, so forearm left low. And the space parts is gonna, Maya is gonna automatically put an underline there, which is what we want. Then this part is gonna be arm left low. You can pick your own names. I mean, you don't have to name this arm or this forearm or whatever, but this is basically the way it works. So if your character is kind of unconventional, and maybe you have a character that has 4 sets of arms, it doesn't matter. You're gonna have to find a way to name them so you can remember. I mean, these don't really matter. They're just a way of telling Substance Painter what type of textures you want. It doesn't really matter what you name these, because at the end, the model that we're going to import into Unity is going to be consistent of one piece. It's not going to be different pieces, because that's really not organized enough for Unity. Because in Unity, it's a whole lot of mess. It's environments, it's lighting, light sources, it's textures and materials and meshes and characters. You're gonna have to keep it as simple as possible. So this is the forearm. I'm gonna name this torso, because it doesn't have any left or right. It's just gonna be torso low, just like that. This is gonna be head low. So you get the gist. I'm gonna fast forward to this next part. I'm gonna name all of these and I'm gonna show you what's next. Okay, so I did all the names here for the low poly, and as a final warning, you should really always be aware of the names. So do a final check. For example, in this one, I forgot about this cylindrical parts on the back, and I realized there was some stuff that wasn't named properly, so I clicked on them and realized that I hadn't combined the torso with these pieces. And now my low poly names are done, so I'm going to have to exactly do the same thing for the high poly model. So let's hide this guy. Actually, you know what? Okay, I'm gonna have to name the high poly exactly the same way, so the Substance Painter is gonna recognize the pieces that I'm planning for it. So if I name these pieces, the arm left underline high, the Substance Painter is going to understand that I want this piece to be baked on the low poly named arm left low. You get it, right? So it's that simple. But first, I forgot to, convert this guy and then mirror it to the other side. Okay, let me just make sure there's no pieces missing, like this. Same thing here. I think we're done. Yep. Okay. So let's combine the pieces that need to be one. Like so. This guy with these two. Combine. And I'm gonna do the exact same type of names. So for this piece, it's gonna be arm, left, high. You could change these names to something else, maybe just a capital L or capital H if you want in Substance Painter, but the default is low and high, and you don't have to really change it, so you should probably just follow my instructions and you'll be set. So let me name these and get back to you. And that's it. So we have the namings right. The high poly and the low poly are appropriately named, and they can be baked properly. And I'm just doing a last final check to make sure they all end with low. Keep in mind, if there's like a number next to the low, this is not gonna work. It has to end with underline low. It doesn't work any other way. So you have to make sure the naming is exactly right, or your textures are not gonna be as good as you want them to be. And as a final step, we're gonna select the low poly model, and we're gonna assign a new material to it to make sure that the whole model is consistent of one single material, because each one of the materials here is going to be a texture set in Substance Painter, so that's what we want. So let's give it a new Lambert and let's name it Gabriel. Okay, and as the final and last step, we're gonna have to soften the edges of the model. You see these sharp lines here? These are gonna be visible in your textures if you don't soften the lines, and you're gonna see the difference now. Go to select the model, and but this is only for the low poly. Don't do this for the high poly. You don't need to. Select the low poly, go to mesh display and click on soften edge, and that's it. If you see any weird blackening, I mean these kind of black edges, these are fine because the character is really low poly, and these they're not going to have any effect on your textures. But if you see one of them that's weirdly black, you can select it and go into mesh display and click on unlock normals. If it changes, you're gonna know for sure that you've been having a problem. So now that we have this set, let's select the low poly, go to file, export textures, bring up the settings, click on FBX export. If you don't have FBX in your settings, just go into I think it was in window setting and preferences, plugin manager, and just kind of check the inbox for the FBX export. But by default it's on, so you should have it on. But if it's not, you can just go ahead and plugin manager and change it. So the FBX is selected. Let's click on export, export in desktop, and in the settings here, just leave everything as is because we don't have textures for now, we don't have animations or anything. Just name it, I'm gonna name this Gabriel Low, so I'm gonna know that this isn't my final low poly that I'm gonna take into Unity. So let's export this, and that's done. Then let's select the high poly. Okay, this doesn't matter if this has a single material or anything. This is going to be just a mesh to be baked onto the low poly, so we would get all these details, but it still would be a really low poly mesh that we can animate and do all kinds of stuff. So again, FBX export, name this Gabriel High, and export. Okay, so now let's jump into Substance Painter, and here we're gonna import our character. By the way, my Substance Painter isn't the final version, but if you have a newer or older version, that's fine. There hasn't been really significant changes in Substance Painter even since 2015 or 16, so I'm sure whatever you have is fine. Go to File, New. So this is a new project, and there are different templates for Substance Painter, but the default is PBR Metallic Roughness. And if you don't have any if your character or model or whatever it is, it's all opaque, this is the one to use. If you have any transparency, you might want to go into Alpha Blend, because even though this could apply transparency, it doesn't show it in the window here. So if you have, go with Alpha Blend, Metallic Alpha Blend right here, but this is fine for me. Okay, did I change it? No, this is fine. So let's select the low poly model first, which is here. This is for that. I'm gonna bump the document resolution to 4K. We're gonna leave everything as is and okay. Alright, we have our character here. And the next step is to check that everything is right. So this here, this texture set named Gabriel, this is our material, and it has one texture tile as we wanted it to have. By the way, if you don't have any of these windows, just go into view, I think in windows and view, and this is it, I have the layers, the properties, the shelf, the texture set list, and the texture set setting. And you need all that, but you don't have to use this template. Whatever kind of template you're comfortable with, that's fine. And the next step is to go ahead and bake our textures. Okay, so let's select the texture set, and when you select the texture set, you need to go to texture set setting, and here we have bake mesh maps. Just click on that. First, you need to change the output size to 4K. Because we have a single UV tile, we have to do 4K to get good resolution. Dilation width is 32, which is fine. Here we need to click on this little envelope, and select the Gabriel High. This is the high poly model. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna leave this in 512 to do a test baking to make sure nothing is wrong, because if you don't have the naming exactly right and you put this on 4K, and it's gonna take hours to bake, and you're gonna realize that your model has issues, you're gonna have to do it all over again. So let's do a test run with 512 to make sure the naming is right. I don't need any ID map or precision or thickness, so I'm gonna turn those off. And in the match part, change this to by mesh name, and click on ambient occlusion to bring up the setting, and go to self occlusion and change this to only by mesh name. And this is exactly why we kind of separated the model into so many different pieces instead of just combining it all together and bringing it here, because if you don't have this mesh names that are separated from each other, you can't really tell Substance Painter which objects you want to have ambient occlusion on which of them. But this is gonna make sense a lot more. I'm gonna tell you in a minute. And the anti-aliasing, I usually leave this in 2x2 or 4x4, but this is gonna make the baking part last a lot longer. So, and because this is the test, I'm not gonna click that on. So let's click bake for now and make sure we don't have any problem with our high poly and low poly model. Okay, so the test bake is done, and it looks like we don't have any problems at all. The reason I've done this is because, for example, if you had named your low poly, this piece of your low poly calf left low, calf right low, but in the high poly you named it something different, or you had a typo in it, then instead of having the textures on your model, this was gonna be a whole lot of mess and lines and stuff like that, because Substance hadn't found the high poly model for your low poly, and that would leave a whole lot of mess instead of the look that you were going for. But I can see that this model doesn't have any problems. So by the way, this is the navigation in Substance Painter is exactly like Maya, holding down Alt, and if you want to turn the light source around, you should press down Shift and right click and drag, and that is going to shift the light source around. So now that we know the model is right, we can go to the texture set setting, and I'm gonna close all these textures, delete all of them, and get back to the setting here, change this to 4K, and pick the anti-aliasing to be 2x2. Everything else is fine. And let's click bake and see you when it's done. Alright guys, the baking is done. And here's our model. Looks pretty good. No visible problems. And now I can show you what would have happened if the model was just one piece. Then you see these parts, there are ambient occlusion between this part and this little cylinder here, which we want because they're one piece. But if these were all one piece, these would have left marks here and they wouldn't have been clean. These would have had leaving marks here on this body. This here would have left marks on these, and that's not what we want. You could, you could try it out like that. You can see why we didn't do that. That's fine. So now we're gonna get into the textures. If you don't have a basic understanding of Substance Painter, maybe you should watch a video about that first, because I'm gonna explain everything I do, don't get me wrong, but you might not understand everything that goes on if you don't have a basic understanding, if you don't know the fundamentals. But let's just get started first. And for Gabriel here, I kind of have an idea for his looks. I want it to be a combination of 3 or 4 materials. I want it to have a golden and metallic combination for him. So let's first build the metal texture. Let's delete this layer here, start a fill layer, Control G to put it in a group, name the folder Gabriel Metal, okay. And the thing you should understand about texturing a character for pipeline, there's more than one way to do textures for your models. You should understand that first. For example, if I want Gabriel to have a red line on his chest, I could just go ahead and create a paint layer, get a brush, and change the color of the brush to red, and just go on the viewport and just drag a line on his chest. But the problem with this, and let's do another way here. For that, I'm gonna open up add a fill layer. I'm gonna add a black mask to it. Go back to the fill layer. I'm gonna turn everything off but the color. Pick the color red. Then go here on the mask, add a paint layer to it, and go do exactly the same thing I did with the paint layer. And these might look exactly the same, but the difference is that if I wanted, maybe at some point I wanted to change the color of this brush, if I was on the paint layer, I could go in the paint layer setting and change the color to whatever I want. Or maybe I want it to be metallic, then I can go and make it a metal. Maybe I want it to be rough or shiny, I can do the same. Or maybe I want it to be bumpy, like this, or pushed in. But for this guy, for the paint layer, there's literally nothing that I can do. It's just a layer, empty layer with a brush on it. There's no setting. There's nothing that I can change. It's basically useless. And that might be fine for a, I don't know, like something that you just gotta do to get a render out of it. That might be fine. But if in a pipeline, you can change your mind about your character at any point. You might need to come back and change the look. You might want to add different additions to it, like stab wounds or blood or whatever. So you always have to keep your options open, and that's going to be the most part of the process that I'm going to teach you. So let's start with this metal here. Now that we got that out of the way, so I'm gonna start with a black, maybe color, maybe not so black, maybe something like this. I don't need height or normal here, so the color is right. The roughness is gonna be kind of rough because we can change that anytime, and metallic is gonna be maybe not all the way metal, maybe something like this. And the color is also too dark, maybe something like this, not so rough. We're gonna add roughness later on, so I'm just trying to figure out what type of roughness I want. Yeah, so let's leave it like this. If this wasn't the character, if this was like I don't know, an old car or something, I would have just made very rough non-metallic color here to signify the paint over on a metal surface, which is a paint is not metallic, so doesn't need metal, and it could be really rough to make the metal pop. Then I would have added a metal edgeware to bring out the metal underneath. But this is a character. This doesn't work like that. So to bring out all these tiny details that are not going to be visible from this far, let's add two different additions to the color, because we can't leave the color so simple. Let me just make this a little bit darker. Okay, so this is gonna be the base paint, and remember to name all your layers as you go on, because they can be really confusing here. And for this one, I'm gonna name it dark corners. And I'm not gonna need any height or normal or metallic right now. And let's turn this off. I'm gonna pick the color on this guy, but go a little darker. Go like color something like this, maybe. Okay, so if we turn this back on, this is exactly right. It's not, maybe not very rough. Okay. And to make this blend with the actual color, I'm gonna add a black mask to it, add the generator, and from the generators I'm gonna pick curvature. So this is the opposite of what I want. I want the corners, so global invert to true. Okay, first we're gonna need some blurriness, so let's blur this out. Go to global balance, reduce that. So now we need to increase it to keep this just in the corners. Maybe a little more contrast. You have to play around with these settings to find the sweet spot. And this is particularly a little difficult for this model because it has really sharp corners. It's not really round. If it was curvy, it would have been done by now. Let's just leave it here for now. We're gonna have to come back anyways. We're gonna add another layer, and this one we're gonna have all these same settings, except this time we're gonna go lighter to make the edges pop. This one, the dark corners were to make the pushed in parts pop, and this one is going to be for the edges. So this is going to be the light edges. The color is going to be slightly brighter than the main color. This is too bright, maybe something like this. And the roughness around the same. Let's add a black layer, generator, and curvature. And let's see what we have. Okay, let's get back to the darker corners. Okay, now let's limit this metal to where it actually is supposed to be. I want it to be these guys. And here too. Let me take these parts out. I'm not sure if I want these in this metal. They don't really look good in that. And to add this part, let's add a paint layer to it. Go with the brush, sharpen the brush, and to change the setting of the brush, you just gotta hold down Control and right click and kind of drag left and right to make it bigger, up and down to make it sharper or softer. If you hold down Control and click on left click and drag left and right, it's gonna rotate the alpha of the brush, but because it's circle now, you don't understand. Actually, this is the flow. Left and right is the flow, which is kind of the opacity like in ZBrush. Up and down is going to rotate it, which because this is circle, you don't really see that. And for this, I do want the flow to be 100%. So let me get in there. And the reason I added a paint layer to this is you should always do something like this. So if you weren't satisfied with the way it looks, you could always delete it and you go back to the original mask. It's gonna save you some time. It has more room for error to fix your problems. Okay, I'm not really glad with the way this looks actually. It's too dirty. This isn't supposed to look like this. Maybe make it more metallic. Yeah, let's make it all the way metal. And make it lighter in every layer here. And finally here. Let's take these roughness layers too. They don't need that. And let's add the next step, which would be the dirt. We need color, roughness, metal, and normal. We don't want it to be metallic all the way back. We do want it to be really rough, and the color has to be really really dark yellow, kind of like a burnt brown. Something like this. Let's add a generator mask. Let's add a generator to the mask and click on dirt. So list dirt level, maybe something like this. It's better. Dirt contrast has to be more to bring out all these details. Maybe something like this. Maybe a little less. Okay. Grunge amount could be a little more. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, we're gonna add more to this material, but for now let's just let's add all the parts that I want to contain this material. For example, these arms. I want to be made with this. But these inner parts are going to be made of gold, so let's subtract these. And now I can show you the value of topology in the texturing part. You see, I knew that I wanted the forearm here to be made of different materials because when I was doing the concept, I kind of imagined these to be made of gold and these to be metallic. So I deliberately did the topology in a way that's gonna make my life easier when I'm selecting these faces. And that's something you should keep in mind when you're modeling, when you're doing your topology. I want the fingers to be made of these, so add these to the mix. And when it comes to these small parts like fingers or maybe toes or whatever, you don't want to go with a really kind of a complicated material because it's not going to look good. All right. And you'll notice that even though I don't have the symmetry turned on, because these parts have the exact same UVs, everything I do here is going to be applied to the other arm here, and same for the legs, which we've talked about before. Okay, let's just start making the gold material. I'm gonna select this folder, click on merge, click on fill layer, Control G to group it, name it gold. Let's add a black mask to it. Select the layer, pick a yellowish color. Something like this maybe. Okay, let's apply this to a piece of the model so we can see what we're doing. That's fine for now. Okay, so I want my base layer to have a color. I don't want height or roughness or normal, maybe a little roughness. So the color here, it's not going to be very rough. It is going to be completely metallic. The color here actually sucks, so let's change it up. Maybe a little less yellow, something like that maybe. Let's go with this for now. And you know that we can change this anytime we want. I'm gonna add a new layer here. Let's call this base. Add a new layer. I want color, I want roughness. I don't want anything else, maybe metallic. Let's pick a greenish yellow, kind of like this maybe, or greenish kind of, and make it kind of rough. And maybe halfway metallic, 0.5. add black mask to it. Sorry, add black mask to it. And a fill layer. Let's pick a stencil that's gonna make this kind of like splattered dots across the surface. Just to have a bit more details here. You know what, let's just go with this for now. And I am gonna add a little bit of height to this, push it in just a bit. And here we're gonna go and edit the balance. Play with the contrast. Change up the size, scale of the texture a little more. Changes false, yeah. Okay, and let's name this dots. New layer to add a little bit more information to the color. Let me drag this down here. Okay, so pick like a green, not so green, something like this. Let's add a black mask, add a generator and curvature. Let's reverse this. It has to be blurred a lot more to blend it in, because keep in mind we just want the color. Something like that, because the gold material is actually not really yellow. And if you want to get the look right, you need to have maybe not so prominent, maybe a little more subtle like this. Yeah, that's better. Let's add some dirt to this. You want color, roughness, metal, and we don't need anything else. Let's pick a really dark yellow, like so, maybe very rough and not metal at all. And the reason I add the metal tab here and leave it as 0 is because if I don't, the metalness of the layers below is going to affect this. So if you want a non-metal layer on metal layers, you have to add the metal piece and leave it at 0. You have to. Add a black mask, generator, pick dirt, bring it way down. The grunge amount, actually contrast maybe should be less. Maybe this a bit more. This a little less. The grunge. Actually, I don't want to have it. I don't want it to have a lot of grunge because I'm gonna add a roughness layer to this, and I don't want too grungy of a dirt. Dirt level has to be more than this. Let's reduce the opacity. Still too much grunge. Okay. Let's add a roughness layer. It is only going to have roughness and maybe color. Color is going to be something close to the original color but darker. And roughness a little bit more than the roughness we gave the main base metal, which was somewhere here. So maybe here. Add a black mask. Turn on, add a black mask and add a fill to that black mask, and let's pick cloud texture, cloud 2. Hold down Alt and click on the mask to see what it looks like. Let's change the scale to something that's gonna suit this size of a character. Bring this back to material. We're gonna have to change the contrast to bring it out. I think this has to be inverted. Yeah, exactly. Contrast, maybe like this. Let's change the balance. Yep, this is fine, but it's still too dark and too noticeable, so let's reduce it a bit, maybe to 50. That's better. Now let's see if we can change the base color to something a little more satisfying. maybe a little less yellowish and a little darker, something like this. Yeah, this looks much better. It's a little too greenish. Yeah, that's better. Let's add all the body parts that I wanted to be in gold. The gold part is kind of like the armor for the character. So I'm adding all the golden parts. This, by the way, this is the mesh option, this is the face, and this is the UV shells. And they all come in handy from time to time. Okay, let's pick all of them. Make these of these metals in object mode. Select the thing. This gold is too greenish. That's better. Paint layer, brush, and add to it. So I'm gonna fast forward through the next stages. I'm sure you understand the basics now. And let's just zap to the point that I've done all the selecting and stuff like that. And okay, so this is gonna be all the selection for now. You can watch, I've selected everything that I'm gonna need to look metal or gold. And let's just do the eyes first. I want the eyes to glow in the middle and metal around. So let's make a new fill layer, Control G and name it eyes. And let's make the glowing part first. I'm gonna need the color and emission for this, and to add emission just go in here and click the plus button and pick emissive, turn it on, and I'm probably gonna go with the light blue, maybe something like this. And for the color, let's pick the same one. And let's add a black mask to the eyes folder and click the whole mesh and get in here and name this blue light. Okay. And let's add a black mask to this and pick this middle part like this. Add a new layer. We don't want emission, normal, or height. Maybe a slightly dark color, kind of rough, and all metallic. Maybe a little lighter. Like this. Yep, this is good. So now that we have everything selected, let's work more on these metals and get the final look. I'm gonna go in the gold folder here. I haven't named these last two layers actually. This is the dirt. This is the roughness. And the other one, no, actually this is the roughness. Just name it roughness 2. Now I'm gonna add some oxidation to this, which is a characteristics of a gold material. I'm gonna pick a kind of yellowish gold this time. Something like this. And it actually should be darker. Okay. Add a black mask to it. Add a generator and pick dripping rust. Like so. Actually, maybe a little height wouldn't be the worst thing. Just a little bit, very little, maybe yeah, maybe something like this. Let's change the size. Maybe the color should be a little more greenish. Actually. Yeah, this is better. And so let's get this right. Spreading. Not so much. Contrast a little less. Maybe something like this. And usually when you have a height, you need to smooth things out a little bit, because height kind of adds a highlight effect to the texture and makes it a lot more visible. So you have to smooth it a little bit. Okay, this isn't bad, but still needs a lot more work. All right. Let's add a color overlay to this bottom part. So I'm just trying to figure out what things I want here. I'm gonna pick a brownish color this time. A little orange even. Like this. We're not gonna need any height or normal or emissive. Maybe a bit more rough and all the way middle. And let's add this to the base color, black mask, and a fill. Let's pick grunge. Not a too intense one, not too much. Maybe this. Yeah, this is good. This is good. Change up the balance a little bit now that the size is good. Yeah, that's fine. I have a piece that's missing here. All right. And finally here, the dripping rust. See what we can to kind of reduce the size a little bit. I've never really used this one, so trying to figure out how we can make it a little less intense. Just didn't work. Okay, let's go something like this. This is better, much better. I'm going to, maybe we should give it a little bit more height. Yeah, maybe something like this. That's better. Make the color a little bit more yellowish. There. And maybe a bit more rough. Yeah. This looks a lot better. Yeah, I kind of like the look of this one. Now let's do the final touches for the metal here. Open it up. I'm gonna make it a bit darker. I don't like this light look. And a bit more shiny, which means less rough. Go to the next one. A little lighter. Next one, a little bit more light. So we have our dirt and everything we need. I don't want the character to be any dirtier than this, but just to show you, I'm gonna add a little bit, some scratches. It doesn't need any folder, this one. Let's name it scratches. It does only need height and a little bit of roughness and metal. Doesn't need any color. Height, this is gonna be less. It's gonna be a bit rough and metallic. Actually, in this color too. I forgot about that. Very light metal. Pushed in height, rough and metallic. Add a black mask to paint. No, sorry, fill layer here, and let's pick scratches. Maybe this one doesn't look half bad. Let's go and reduce the balance a lot to maybe something like this. Increase the contrast, increase the balance. Actually, you know what? This isn't working. I'm gonna go with this one. Less balance, more contrast, less balance still. Maybe change the size, scale a little. It's too big. And again, less balance. Yeah, this is better. And let's make a material for the joints. Only color, roughness, and metal are fine. Very dark, very rough, and not metallic at all. Add a black mask. Let's pick the joints which are inside but visible from here, like so. We turn on symmetry. Yeah, I think there was a part here that wasn't selected. No, it is selected, it's fine, yeah. So that's gonna be it for now, guys, and if you have any questions, please ask in the comment section. If you have any specific type of video that you need, please ask in the comment section, and I appreciate all the support. If you follow, subscribe, and check out our Instagram and Twitter pages, I would appreciate that a lot. But before we finish off, let me show you how to export your textures too. So my character, I'm going to use it in a universal render pipeline in Unity. And for that, I'm going to pick the file type here and go to export textures here. So if you go to output templates, these are all the templates you have. This called my URP. This is the one I've made. But if you're just trying to test your model out, you can pick the universal render pipeline metallic standard. You can use this one. The only difference with mine is that mine has an ambient occlusion, which I've added myself. And to do that, you just gotta click the gray here and go to ambient occlusion and drag and drop it here and pick gray channel, and this is gonna be your ambient occlusion, and just name it like these ones. And that's all I've done, and just saved it as my own. If you want to get it into and if you want to render it out in Maya and Arnold, you can pick the Arnold AI standard, which by default is fine. And so I'm gonna do it for mine. You need to pick a folder. Mine is here. I'm gonna open up a folder called textures. Select folder. Next is the output template, which is the metallic roughness right now, but you need to pick your the output template that you've done here, which mine is my URP. PNG 8 bits, and quality I want 4K, and dilation infinite is fine. And if I click on export, it's going to export all my textures and put them in the folder that I want. So the texturing part is gonna be done completely, and in the next video I'm gonna show you how to rig your character and animate it. So thanks for watching.